Hello, my friends. Glad you're here. Like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss out.
I should have trusted my instincts the moment I saw the ocean mirage. It was a brand new cruise ship, gleaming like a jewel in the Miami harbor, and everyone around me seemed thrilled. Families laughed, couples posed for photos, and the crew moved with robotic precision. But I felt something in the air, an almost tangible weight, like the ship itself was watching me. I shrugged it off. I had a week to relax, to escape my life. The first day felt normal. I lounged by the pool, sipped cocktails, and wandered the endless decks. But every time I glanced down to the lower corridors, I noticed shadows lingering where they shouldn't. I thought I saw figures moving through closed doors, vanishing when I looked closer. I told myself it was my imagination. That night, I woke to a strange sound. Not loud, but insistent, a tapping, rhythmic like fingernails rapping on metal. It came from the hallway outside my cabin. I peeked through the peephole. Nothing. I opened the door. The hallway stretched farther than I remembered, dark and endless. I turned back. My cabin had disappeared. The door was gone. By the second day, passengers began disappearing. First, small things. A man didn't show up for breakfast. A child vanished from the pool. The crew acted as if nothing had happened. They probably went sightseeing, a steward said, smiling too widely. But the smiles didn't reach their eyes. Something was wrong. Later, I tried to find a map of the ship. It was gone. The hallways seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. Staircases ended in walls. Doors opened into rooms I had never seen. Mirrors reflected passengers I didn't recognize, some faceless, some screaming silently. I realized with a cold certainty, the ship was alive and it was playing with me. By the third night, a fog rolled across the decks. Thick, white, curling like smoke, it swallowed the horizon and muted sound. The horn sounded, but not in normal blasts. Short, staccato bursts like Morse code. The passengers froze outside, staring blindly into the mist, expressionless. I could barely breathe. I ran through hallways that no longer obeyed geometry. Some doors opened onto nothing. Some stairs led straight into walls. I tried to escape. I found a lifeboat and jumped, paddling desperately. The water outside was unnaturally viscous, resisting every stroke. Behind me, the ocean mirage loomed impossibly large, decks curving into fog. Shadows pressed against the railings, reaching, faceless and silent. I rode until my arms ached, ignoring the numbness spreading through my body. Hours or days passed. Time lost all meaning. Eventually, I saw land. Pale sand, stretching endlessly, forest beyond the dunes. Relief washed over me. I ran to the shore, but the moment my feet touched the sand, I froze. Figures emerged from the mist. Hundreds of them, pale, hollow-eyed, wandering aimlessly. They were the missing passengers. And at their center stood a woman I had glimpsed in the fog. Hair plastered her face, eyes black, unblinking. She watched me. "You can't leave," she said, and her voice filled my head. "You belong here now." I tried to run. The sand shifted like water beneath my feet, pulling me back. The horizon curved unnaturally, the forest moving in impossible ways. The ship had followed me. This wasn't land. It was an extension of the ship's will. I was trapped. Despair set in. I fell to my knees, imagining I would join the faceless passengers, becoming one of them. But then I noticed something strange. The ones who had stopped moving, who had surrendered, looked calm. Their fear had ended, and the ship treated them differently. It fed on terror, but not on acceptance. I took a deep breath and stopped struggling. I refused to panic. I observed the faceless figures, the shifting sand, the fog curling around them. I listened to the ship in the way I had never dared before. Slowly I stood. I focused on understanding, not fear. The woman in the center tilted her head. The faceless passengers turned, uncertain. The sand hardened beneath my feet, the fog thinned. A path opened through the dunes toward the forest. "You see it," the woman said, her voice still in my head. "You understand. Few ever do." I realized then that the ship was a predator, yes, but also a test. It had been feeding on the weak-minded, the fearful, shaping reality around them. But I had survived because I refused to give it power over me. I walked toward the horizon, fully aware that I was inside its world, yet free in a way no one else was. The faceless passengers followed, not threatening me, not dragging me down. They were witnesses, observers. The ship's presence pulsed around me, immense and patient, and for the first time, I did not feel fear. I had a choice. I could return to the water, to the endless drifting, or I could stay, embrace what I had learned, and move freely inside the ship's domain. I chose the latter. I am now part of it. Not a prisoner, not a victim, but a guardian. The ocean mirage drifts somewhere beyond maps and radar, waiting for the next passengers. Most will succumb to terror. Some will vanish. A rare few, like me, confront it, survive it, and become guides for the next travelers. I walk its corridors, invisible to fear, teaching the curious, observing the lost, shaping the ship's world not with terror, but with understanding. The ocean mirage is alive, ancient, and vast, but it is not invincible. Courage and clarity are weapons against it. And when the next travelers step aboard, I will meet them, not with malice, but with guidance. Fear is the ship's language. I have learned another. I am no longer a passenger. I am its sentinel. And in that truth, I am free. I have been looking forward to being home alone for weeks. My parents were going out of town for a long weekend, leaving me with the house entirely to myself for the first time since I was 13. At 16, it felt like freedom. No rules, no one checking if I'd done my homework, no one telling me to go to bed. Just me, the quiet, and the subtle thrill of independence. The first night was perfect. I ordered pizza, lounged on the couch with a blanket, and scrolled through my phone. Outside, the street was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every creak of an old house feel louder than it should. I told myself I was imagining things. Then came a knock. Soft at first, like someone tapping a stick against the door. I froze. My parents had locked the doors before leaving. No one should be here. I peeked through the window. The backyard was empty, shrouded in darkness. No wind, no movement, just the dim glow of the streetlight. I shook my head and went back to the couch. Maybe it was a branch. Maybe I was imagining it. But then the knock came again, louder, more insistent. I whispered hello. Silence. My heart began to pound. I grabbed the baseball bat from behind the door. The sound stopped, replaced by something worse. Footsteps, slow, dragging, coming from the hallway leading to my bedroom. I pressed myself against the wall. My phone was dead. No signal, no dial tone. I was completely cut off, trapped in a house that had suddenly become alien. The footsteps paused outside my door. A whisper followed, soft and deliberate. You shouldn't be alone. I froze. The voice was calm, almost soothing, but my gut told me it wasn't human. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. My limbs felt heavy, like I was moving underwater. I backed toward the kitchen, thinking I could barricade myself. But the walls looked wrong. Longer, darker. The house had changed. Every familiar corner felt strange, every doorway misaligned. I realized then that this wasn't just a break-in or a prank. Something was reshaping the house around me. I ran upstairs, hoping the attic would be safe. The stairs groaned beneath me, but it wasn't the usual settling noise. It sounded deliberate, alive, like the house itself was moving with me. I reached the attic door and yanked it open. The space was cramped and dusty, filled with boxes of old junk. I crouched behind a pile of furniture, trying to catch my breath. Silence. For a moment, relief washed over me. Maybe it had stopped. Then I saw it, my reflection, in a small, cracked mirror leaning against the wall. But it wasn't me. My eyes were black, my lips curved into a smile I had never made. My skin pale. Wrong. I stumbled backward, hitting the floor. When I looked again, the mirror was empty. The attic had changed. The walls stretched farther than they should, shadows twisting in impossible directions, whispering my name. Then I heard a voice behind me. My voice. You belong here now. I turned and saw it. Me. Same hair, same clothes, same height, but calm, smiling, patient. I ran, but every step I took brought me closer to it. My hands passed through it like smoke. Then it touched me. Cold, impossibly cold. My vision went black. When I woke, I was on the couch. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The house looked normal. My parents were still out of town. My phone worked. Relief surged. Maybe it had been a nightmare. I went to the mirror in the hallway. My reflection smiled. Not me, my double, waiting. I ran outside, down the street, past the neighbors' houses, past the familiar streetlights, until I reached a friend's house. I told them everything. They didn't believe me. The police found nothing. No forced entry. No shadows. No whispers. Just me and the lingering terror in my mind. I returned home that evening. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I stared at the hallway mirror. It winked. And I realized then I hadn't escaped. The house hadn't let me go. It had claimed me. My reflection had stepped out, and I had stepped in. Now, every mirror I pass, I wonder which one will be home alone next. The state trooper told me later that most people who go missing in Alaska don't disappear all at once. They thin out first. Fewer phone calls, shorter sentences, missed check-ins. By the time someone notices, the wilderness has already made up its mind. I didn't know that when I took the job. I was hired to spend one winter maintaining a weather and seismic monitoring station on the western coast, north of Nome. It wasn't glamorous work. Download data, check sensors, keep the power systems alive, but it paid well and came with the kind of isolation I thought I wanted. After 20 years of city noise and people talking past each other, the idea of quiet felt like medicine. The station sat on a low bluff overlooking the Bering Sea, a cluster of metal sheds half buried in snow. The nearest village was over 50 miles away, reachable only by snow machine or boat in summer. Once the transport helicopter dropped me off, I was on my own until spring. The first few weeks were uneventful. Cold, yes. Lonely, absolutely. But predictable. The ocean froze and cracked in slow, thunderous groans. The wind sculpted the snow into sharp ridges that looked like frozen waves. I filled my logs, cooked simple meals, slept deeply. The first thing that went wrong didn't feel like horror. It felt like confusion. I woke up one morning to find my boots missing. They were not outside. They were not by the heater where I always left them. I tore the cabin apart looking for them, heart racing, because losing boots out there wasn't an inconvenience. It was a death sentence. I finally found them in the storage shed. They were lined up neatly, toes facing the door, completely clean. No snow, no frost, as if they'd never been worn. I laughed, nervous and loud in the empty air, telling myself I must have moved them without remembering. Stress does that. Isolation does that. I wore them anyway. A few days later, the radio started picking up voices. Not conversations, just fragments. A man coughing, someone humming tunelessly. Once, a woman whispered something I couldn't make out. I checked frequencies, replaced cables, powered the unit down entirely. The voices continued. They didn't sound like they were coming through the speaker. They sounded like they were in the room with me, layered under the hum of the generator, slipping in and out of perception like half-remembered dreams. I reported interference in my logs and avoided thinking about it too much. The first real fear hit when I discovered extra entries in my notebook. Not scribbles, not nonsense. Clear, deliberate sentences written in my handwriting, dated on days I had no memory of. Walked the shoreline again. Ice is thinner near the point. Heard singing tonight. Don't follow it. I read those lines over and over, trying to force recollection. Nothing came. No missing time. No sense of blackout. Just a blank where memory should have been. That night, I stayed awake with the lights on, listening to the wind batter the walls. Sometime after midnight, I heard footsteps crunching in the snow outside. I froze. They were slow, measured, not circling, not approaching directly, just pacing back and forth near the edge of the bluff. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, heart hammering. The light cut through drifting snow and found nothing. No person, no tracks. The ground was smooth and untouched, like fresh plaster. I stood there longer than I should have, the cold biting through my jacket, until common sense forced me back inside. The footsteps resumed as soon as I shut the door. That's when I realized they matched my own pace exactly. The station logs grew stranger after that. Entire hours unaccounted for. Power fluctuations I couldn't explain. The seismic monitor recorded low, rhythmic vibrations every night between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. Too regular to be natural, too deep to hear. I started sleeping in short bursts, afraid of what might happen if I lost track of myself again. One morning, I woke up standing at the edge of the bluff. The sea ice below was fractured and dark, water heaving slowly beneath it. My toes hung inches from open space. My parka was unzipped. My hands were bare and numb. I don't know how long I'd been there. I stumbled back, sobbing, and locked myself inside the cabin, jamming a chair under the handle like that could stop whatever was happening to me. I tried calling for help. The satellite phone connected for the first time in weeks, but instead of a dispatcher, I heard my own voice breathing heavily on the other end. "Don't leave," it said. The line went dead. I broke down after that. There's no heroic way to say it. I cried until my head hurt and my chest burned. I yelled at empty rooms. I begged the station, the land, God, anything to explain what was happening. The explanation came by accident. I was checking the fuel shed when I noticed a faint, sweet smell in the air. Not rot, not smoke, something chemical. Familiar but wrong. I followed it to a vent pipe partially buried in snow behind the main cabin. It was not venting out. It was venting in. A crack in the exhaust line from the generator system had been slowly leaking fumes into the building. Carbon monoxide, colorless, odorless at low concentrations, deadly over time. The symptoms hit me all at once when I understood. Memory gaps, hallucinations, confusion, sleepwalking, hearing voices. I checked the detector. Dead batteries. I don't remember fixing the line or airing out the cabin. I only remember waking up later, wrapped in blankets on the floor, the doors and windows thrown open, the generator shut down. The footsteps stopped after that. So did the voices. The rest of the winter passed quietly. Too quietly, maybe. I kept meticulous notes, triple-checked everything, slept with alarms set to wake me every hour at night. When spring came and the helicopter returned, I was thinner, shakier, but alive. The official report listed it as equipment failure compounded by isolation. Preventable, unremarkable. Before I left, one of the mechanics asked if I'd noticed anything strange out there. Lights, sounds, anything unusual. I thought about the singing, the footsteps, the voice that sounded like me begging me to stay. No, I said, nothing strange. Because the truth was worse. Nothing out there wanted me. Alaska didn't try to keep me. I almost killed myself, and the land didn't care at all. That's the part that still wakes me up at night. Not the hallucinations, not the fear. But the knowledge that the wilderness doesn't need monsters. It's perfectly capable of erasing you without trying. I had taken this train countless times before, the late night ride from New York to Philadelphia. The empty cars, the rhythmic hum of the rails lulling me to a near sleep. That night, though, everything fell off from the moment I stepped onto the platform. The station was nearly deserted. The few people there staring blankly at their phones or the flickering lights overhead. One man lingered near the far end of the platform, wearing a long coat and staring directly at me. When our eyes met, he smiled, but it wasn't a smile meant for comfort. It was the kind of smile that makes your skin crawl. I boarded anyway, telling myself I was just being paranoid. The train car smelled of old metal and damp upholstery. I slid into my usual window seat and watched as the other passengers settled around me. An elderly woman knitting silently, a businessman absorbed in a laptop, and a young woman staring blankly at the window, her headphones dangling from her ears. They didn't look at me. They didn't talk. They barely moved. The train pulled out of the station with its familiar sway. But after a few minutes, the lights flickered, not the usual hum of an old system, but a deliberate pulse, like the car itself was alive. I looked at the other passengers. Their faces were vacant, almost hollow. I rubbed my eyes, but nothing changed. About an hour into the ride, the train jolted violently. My stomach flipped. It wasn't the usual bump at a track switch. This was deliberate, almost as if the train itself had shifted off its rails for a moment. The elderly woman didn't flinch. The young woman didn't move at all. Only the businessman's hands hesitated above the keyboard, frozen mid-type. I stood up to stretch, my legs shaking. As I walked toward the next car, I noticed something impossible. The aisle seemed to stretch farther than it should, elongating as I approached the end. Shadows gathered at the edges, thick and viscous, pooling unnaturally. At the far end, a figure appeared, tall, impossibly thin, moving in jerky mechanical motions. Its face was a featureless black void, yet I felt it watching me. I tried to turn and retreat, but the door I had passed through moments ago was gone, replaced by a smooth wall. My heart pounded. I was trapped. I stumbled into the next car. Empty. The seats were intact, but the floor bore strange dark streaks, as if shadows had been smeared and hardened. I glanced at the windows. Outside, the familiar countryside was gone. Blackness stretched endlessly, dotted with tiny flickering lights that pulsed in patterns too strange for stars. The figure appeared again, gliding toward me without sound. My mind screamed to me to flee, but every exit I tried was blocked. The air around me thickened, pressing down like a physical weight. And then the whispers started, not spoken, but inside my head. You belong here. You were meant to ride. I sank to the floor, shaking, realizing the train wasn't a train at all. It was a vessel, collecting passengers, choosing them carefully. It had chosen me. I understood then why the figures didn't attack. It didn't need to. The train itself would keep me trapped, suspended between this black void and a world I could no longer reach. One of the figures stopped a few feet from me, its arm extended, pointing to the nearest window. I looked and saw it, a faint glow like distant city lights, but strangely warm, almost inviting. For the first time, I felt a thread of hope. I could leave. There was a way back. I forced myself to rise, trembling, and move toward the window. The air resisted, tugged at me, testing my resolve. One more step. I could step through and escape. My mind screamed that this was my only chance. I did. I landed hard on concrete, gasping. Morning sunlight bathed a suburban station in soft light. The air smelled like dew and gasoline, and for the first time in hours I could breathe freely. The train, my nightmare, was gone. No cars, no passengers, nothing. I had returned to the world I knew. I walked to my car, still trembling. I drove home, trying to tell myself it had been a dream. But I knew the truth. I had seen it. Weeks later, I found a ticket in my mailbox. No return address, no explanation. Just a folded piece of paper with my name and a route. New York to Philadelphia, midnight departure. I never rode another night train. I never traveled alone at night. And yet, sometimes when shadows stretch too long across my apartment, I swear I hear it. The faint hum of wheels, the rhythm of rails that shouldn't exist. The train waits, patient, eternal, and I know, without doubt, that one day it will call for me again. I didn't go out that night to escape anything. I went out because my dog, Milo, refused to sleep. It was almost 1 a.m., cold for early November. I live in a rural town in northern Michigan, the sort of place where the dark feels thicker once you get past the last streetlight. I clipped Milo's leash on, planning to keep it short. 10 minutes, maybe 15. The road was empty. Milo sniffed everything like he always did. But about 5 minutes in, he stopped dead. Not slowed, not hesitated, stopped. His ears were pinned back, and a low growl vibrated in his chest. Milo never growled. I followed his gaze. At the lowest point of the road, where fog sometimes pooled, there was something dark on the asphalt. At first, I thought it was a fallen branch. Then it moved, just adjusting, like something settling into a position it preferred. My pulse jumped. Nope, I muttered, already turning around. But Milo pulled forward. He strained against the leash, eyes locked on the shape ahead. That's when a voice drifted out of the dark. Evening. It sounded normal, friendly even. A man stepped into view from the fog. He was tall, bundled in a heavy coat. "Roads I see," he said. "Be careful." Relief washed over me. "Yeah, thanks. My dog's just being weird." I turned to go back the way I came. "Wait," the man said. "You shouldn't turn around." My stomach tightened. "Why not?" "Because you already passed the marker," he said gently. I looked behind me. The road was gone. No pavement, no gravel, no porch light, just open forest, trees packed together like a wall. "What is this?" I asked, my breath hitching. The man glanced at the dark shape on the road. "Maintenance." I looked again, forcing myself to really see it. It wasn't an object. It was a hole. Not on the road, but in the night itself. A depression where light bent wrong. "Something came through earlier," the man said. "We're closing it up." Other figures emerged from the fog, forming a loose circle around the hole. "You already helped," the man said. "You brought a witness." He nodded at Milo. My heart slammed against my ribs. "I'm leaving." "You can't," he said, "but you can finish the walk." The ground vibrated faintly. From the hole came a sound, not a noise, but a feeling. Pressure, hunger. Milo began barking, frantic now, pulling toward the circle. I screamed his name, but strong hands grabbed my arms, holding me back. Milo reached the edge. He didn't fall in. He stopped and sniffed the air. The hole reacted. The darkness folded inward like fabric being pulled tight. The vibration intensified, then cut off abruptly. The hole collapsed with a sharp pop, like a vacuum seal breaking. Silence. The fog began to thin. The road behind me faded back into place. Milo trotted back to me, unharmed, tail wagging. "What the hell was that?" I demanded. The man released me. "A weak spot. They open sometimes. Animals help close them." He met my gaze. He volunteered. I walked home without looking back. My door was right where it should be. A week later, I saw a missing person flyer at the store. A man who went walking with his dog. The dog was found alone. I take Milo in the yard now, but sometimes he stops and stares toward the bend in the road, tail wagging slowly. Like he's waiting to help again. I've always believed that mountains have a memory, that if you tread carefully, pay attention, they will speak to you. Not in words, but in signs, in the way a ridge falls, the way the wind moves, the subtle hints left in the soil. I never realized how literal that idea would become. Last September, I went with two friends on a 3-day trek through a remote section of the White Mountains in New Hampshire. I'd been there before, in summer, following marked trails and enjoying the views. This time we wanted something different, a loop along unmarked ridges deep in the backcountry with minimal contact with the outside world. The first day was ordinary, in the way ordinary can feel extraordinary. Crisp, cold air, sunlight filtering through the pines, and the quiet hum of a forest alive with birds and squirrels. We joked, teased each other, and paused frequently for photos, thinking we had the world to ourselves. I remember thinking how perfect it felt to be completely alone, yet completely free. The second day brought the fog. Thick, gray, and unnatural, it rolled down the ridges like smoke, swallowing the trail and every landmark we recognized. My GPS began to falter, the screen flickering between coordinates that didn't exist and ones we'd never seen. The compass spun in lazy circles. Every ridge and cliff we reached looked like the last. We were lost, but the mountains didn't panic. Only we did. By mid-afternoon, we noticed signs of something deliberate. Rocks stacked into piles and straight lines along the path. Trees bent towards certain points, roots exposed as if the soil had shifted to guide or block us. The forest felt deliberate, watching, shaping itself around us. I told myself it was paranoia, but deep inside, I knew it wasn't. Night fell quickly. We made camp on a narrow ridge, the fog pressing against us. The silence was complete. No rustling, no wind, no water from the stream below. I felt eyes on me, just beyond the reach of our small fire. Shadows stretched and wavered as if they had weight and intention. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. I could feel the forest pressing closer, watching, waiting. Around midnight, I woke to a sound like scraping wood, deliberate and slow. I shone my flashlight into the fog. At first, nothing. Then, a figure appeared at the edge of the firelight. Impossibly tall, limbs bent at wrong angles, head tilting unnaturally. Its face was hidden, but I felt its eyes. My blood froze. I wanted to call out, but my throat closed. Then it simply vanished. Morning offered no relief. The fog had thickened, and we were utterly disoriented. Every tree, every boulder, every ridge looked foreign. Even the small streams were in different places than the maps indicated. Hunger and cold gnawed at us, but fear was heavier. On the third day, I found it, a cabin, though it didn't belong in any reality I recognized. Its walls were warped, its roof sagging at impossible angles. The windows were narrow and oddly placed, and the door beckoned as though it had been waiting for me. My friends wanted to stay inside, to rest and warm ourselves. I hesitated. I didn't want to go in, but desperation pushed me forward. Inside, the air was thick, metallic, and heavy. The walls were carved with names, hundreds of them. Some were familiar from missing person reports, others unknown. And then I saw my own name carved freshly deep into the wood. My heart stopped. The cabin seemed alive. Shadows stretched and twisted along the walls. One of my friends, Rachel, stepped forward, and the floor beneath her shifted slightly, like something breathing beneath it. I screamed, but when I turned, she was gone. I tried to run, but the cabin seemed to have grown larger, its corners twisting and folding impossibly. I bolted outside, into the fog, calling for my remaining friend, Thomas. The forest had changed completely. Trails I had recognized twisted into cliffs. Trees leaned at unnatural angles. Hours, or maybe days, passed. Time had no meaning. Finally, I stumbled onto a ridge that looked familiar, a small lake glimmering below. The fog parted enough to see the figure again, taller than I remembered, watching from the opposite ridge. It raised an arm, and the slope beneath me moved, sliding me down toward the water. I hit the lake, cold water shocking me into consciousness, and swam to shore. The mountains looked normal again. Trails aligned with my maps. Streams ran in their usual channels. Trees were straight and familiar. I hiked back to civilization, exhausted, starving, and terrified. Authorities searched the area, but found nothing. No cabin, no warped trees, no missing friends. Months passed. I tried to return to normal life, but the memory haunted me. Then one morning, I found a small package on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. The ridge where I had camped, fog curling over the peaks. And there, standing at the edge of the mist, were Rachel and Thomas, looking directly at the camera, calm and silent. Behind them, in the fog, the tall figure, watching. I realized then that the mountains hadn't taken them. They had collected them, preserved them. And now, the mountains were letting me see the truth. I left my apartment that night. I drove east, far away from mountains, ridges, and forests. I haven't been near one since. But sometimes when the wind shifts just right, I feel it, the sense of being watched, the pull of ridges I've never seen. I understand now. The mountains are patient. They wait, and they will call me again. I don't know if I'll answer when they do, but I know I won't be able to stop myself. I never thought a national park could feel alive. Not in the way that matters. I'd hiked, camped, and backpacked alone in forests before, but what I experienced last summer in North Cascades National Park changed how I see wilderness forever. I started early, parking at a small trailhead near Ross Lake. The area was quiet, almost unnaturally so. Birds chirped in the distance, but the closer I got to the trail, the more isolated it felt. I packed light, tent, water, food for 3 days, but I had a gut feeling that I wouldn't need much of it. The first day was serene. The trail wound along ridges with distant snow-capped peaks, streams glimmering like glass, mossy rocks scattered like nature's ornaments. I set up camp near a creek, the air smelling of damp earth and pine. I fell asleep that night, thinking I was completely alone, but the forest has a way of letting you know you're never truly alone. I woke before dawn to the sound of a snapping branch. Not a normal forest sound, but deliberate, sharp. My flashlight revealed nothing. I shrugged, blaming a deer, and crawled back into my sleeping bag. By late morning, I decided to push further along an unmarked side trail I had seen on a small hand-drawn map in a ranger's pamphlet. It was steep and narrow, disappearing into thick trees that blocked the sun. The path twisted unnaturally, rising and falling like the forest had been carved to confuse me. I chalked it up to natural erosion, but the deeper I went, the more I felt eyes on me. I stopped at a small clearing and noticed something I couldn't explain. Stones. Hundreds of stones, arranged in concentric circles around a small depression in the earth. In the center lay a blackened piece of wood, charred as if it had been burnt, but strangely intact. I felt a chill run down my spine. I bent closer. The ground inside the circle seemed off. The dirt was darker, softer, almost like it was absorbing light. I reached out a hand and touched it. The second my fingers pressed the soil, I felt a tremor under my palm, a vibration that ran up my arm. I pulled back sharply, my heart racing. Something was here, waiting. I told myself to move on, to keep hiking, but the trail behind me had disappeared. The trees were thicker, the underbrush impassable in ways it hadn't been moments ago. Shadows twisted between the trunks. The wind carried whispers, soft and unintelligible, but unmistakably human. I ran. Hours passed. I had no idea where I was. The sky darkened unnaturally fast, and I realized I hadn't heard birds or insects in ages. The forest had fallen completely silent, except for the sound of my own frantic breathing. Then I saw movement in the corner of my eye, figures among the trees. They weren't human, at least not quite. Tall, thin, with elongated limbs, they moved jerkily, as if animated by some other will. Their skin was pale, reflective, almost wet in the dim light. They didn't approach directly, but always stayed just out of reach, watching, waiting. I stumbled into a second clearing and nearly fell over another pond, still and black. Its surface mirrored the sky, but the reflection was wrong. I could see the figures around me reflected in the water, though they were nowhere nearby. Their faces twisted in smiles I couldn't comprehend, empty, gaping, impossible. I didn't stop to examine it. I ran again, but every direction looked the same. I kept coming back to that pond. The trees around it were gnarled, leaning inward as if to trap me. I tried calling for help, but my voice vanished before it left my lips. At some point, I realized I wasn't alone in a forest. I was inside something older, something alive, something that had been here long before the park had trails or rangers. I didn't just feel watched, I felt studied, examined like an insect trapped under a jar. I tripped over roots and landed on my hands in the dirt, scraping them badly. When I looked up, I saw them, all of them. The tall figures surrounding the pond, watching, waiting. Then the tallest one stepped forward. Its head tilted in a way that made my stomach churn. It raised a hand, impossibly long fingers stretching toward the water, and whispered my name. I froze. No, not froze. Something inside me did. A primal recognition that this wasn't just a forest, wasn't just a place. It was a predator. Then the strangest thing happened. It stopped. The others followed its lead. They didn't advance. They didn't vanish. They simply waited. And in that moment, I realized that the only thing keeping me alive wasn't running. It was acknowledging them. I swallowed hard and spoke. I see you. The figure tilted its head further. I felt the air shift. It was testing me, yes, but I didn't flinch. I belong here as much as you do, I said. I'm just passing through. The pond stilled. The whispers stopped. The forest exhaled as if releasing a held breath for the first time in centuries. I kept walking, slowly, deliberately, back toward the main trail. Every step counted. Every heartbeat was proof that I was alive and present. When I finally emerged onto the marked trail hours later, the sun was low in the sky. I didn't look back. The forest behind me had returned to its normal quiet, as if nothing had happened. I reached my car just before dark, shaking, exhausted, and drove away, not stopping until I was out of the park entirely. I tried to rationalize it afterward. Exhaustion, hallucination, stress. But I knew the truth. The forest was alive in ways I couldn't explain. It could sense fear. It could bend space, manipulate paths, test its prey, and somehow I had survived not by running, but by acknowledging it, by not giving it the power of my panic. I've returned to civilization, to city streets and crowded sidewalks, and yet I still dream of that pond. Sometimes at night, I wake and see ripples across the surface in my bedroom floorboards. But I'm not afraid anymore, because I know the difference between the forest as it hunts and the forest as it studies. And if I ever return, I'll walk slowly, deliberately, unafraid, because that is the only way to survive its attention. The national parks aren't just wilderness. They are older, stranger, and far more alive than we will ever understand. And someday, they will test you. When they do, the way you react will decide if you walk away or if you never leave at all.
I hope you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more terrifying tales.